Welcome to the Meadowlands Chamber of Commerce Emerging Leaders Podcast, aimed at helping you excel and take your professional career to the next level. Sponsored by Henry Kaminsky Jr. and www.uniquedesigns.net. Now, let's get into today's show.
What is going on, Chamber fams, and welcome to another amazing episode here at the Emerging Leaders Podcast. We have, of course, our co-host, Henry Kaminsky, Unique Designs, in the building. But who I would love to introduce you to is this legend in the game of sports marketing. We got Frank Vuono here with us, who's been in business over 35 years. He has a roadmap. He's been in corporate. He's struggled. He's had his own company, and now he's part owner of this amazing sports company known as 16W. Frank, we welcome you with open arms. We're so excited you gave us the time, and we're excited of all the information that you're going to give all of our chamber members. And outside of that, everyone that's interested in becoming a chamber member. So one of the things we like to do here at Emerging Leaders Podcast is hand over the baton. And Frank, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your story and what you're working on right now, my brother.
Well, thanks, Fernando. It's great to be here. Hi, Henry. How's it going? Good to see you again.
What's going on?
Things are good, but it's particularly hectic right now at this time of year, heading to a little event down in Atlanta. Some people call it the Super Bowl. It's really kind of a meeting that it's really happens at the time of year when we celebrate my birthday. So I like the fact that the industry throws me a birthday party. It's really a big shindig every year at this time of year. So just getting prepared for that. And
that's awesome.
Packed up all my bags and getting ready to ship out, hopefully beat out the snowstorm that's coming up in the next couple of days up here in the north.
Oh man, where do we start, guys? Where do we start? This gentleman here has been a wealth of information for me, and he recently, over the past maybe 6 months or so, sort of helped me get my chops in gear. I mean, the guy took me under his wing, if you will, and really helped me because we're in the same sort of space, not in the sports marketing stuff, but in more in the branding and the marketing things. Man, one thing that you said to me, Frank, a long time ago was, I don't think you're charging enough.
That's correct.
Right? And that,
yeah, I thought you were, listen, it's amazing what people's perceptions are. I learned that lesson a long time ago. I tell people you get what you pay for. And I kind of have a reputation, I don't know if it's good or bad, that I'm always going to be the most expensive guy in the room. But I learned that from my partner who taught me a lot about, how people value things. It's just crazy. You've probably seen recently, and it's a lesson for everybody out there. There were a couple of people that ran tests recently. One was a shoe store where you could probably look it up. There was a shoe store where they were having a real hard time selling these dog shoes that were low priced. And one of the guys, as a last resort, the manager said, you know what, put the price of $1,500 on those shoes in the window. And lo and behold, within like 3 days, they sold the shoes because they were $1,500. And I think it's just a lesson learned that, unfortunately, people's perception are that the more expensive things are, the better they are. It's just like that with wine or anything else that you like to drink and so on. So, we all know that if you lined up a bunch of bottles of wine, 90% of the people couldn't tell the difference between the most expensive bottle and otherwise. So it's all a matter of what perceptions are. But when you're handing out real value, when you're delivering real value to people, they'll keep coming back. So in your case, I know you play a tremendous role in helping shape people's brands, and you only get paid for a little amount of time, right? But if you really do your job well, it lasts a lifetime. So those people are going to benefit the rewards of your help for a really long time. And so that's the way it has to be explained, and that's the way it should be.
I love it. Fernando, here's what I want to do. I want to just back up a second. I got a little excited there. I'm not going to lie. Right? But let's back up and share with the audience, the folks that don't know who Frank is. I kind of want to hear the come up story again.
Oh, well, We were just talking earlier to my good friend Jim Kirkus, who was my next door neighbor in Lyndhurst, New Jersey, growing up. And, I came from very humble roots, Italian immigrant family. To achieve where I've been, where I've achieved is just incredible. But I got very fortunate, had terrific parents, terrific siblings, 2 older brothers who guided me along the way. Wound up getting lucky that I played athletics and paid attention in school enough that I was able to attend Princeton University, which opened my eyes to a lot of things in the world. And from there, was in the right place at the right time. For all the young people listening, they have a tremendous advantage of information at their fingertips. But back then, we had none of that. If you wanted to go research a job, you went to career services, or you had to go into the library. You had to go down into the library, you go into the microfiche room or whatever to research. But if you didn't know what you didn't know, you didn't even know what to look for. So I didn't even know what to look for, So amazingly, I did a lot of artwork and visual arts in college, as well as I was an economics major. Got into a spat with some people who were alumni from Princeton one time at a gathering in New York City for all the senior football players. And I was bitching and moaning that, I didn't have a job yet. And our athletic director, a guy by the name of Royce Flippin, who I had no idea before he was an athletic director at Princeton, was a very high-ranking guy at the General Foods Company way back when. I'm dating myself now. But GF was a huge force in the food business, grocery business. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I just added a blue. I said advertising, because I had the creative background and I had the economics background, business background. And I said advertising by the grace of God. I don't even know why I said that. But he wound up having tremendous contacts at a company called Young and Rubicam, and he gave me my start in the business. And if I ever did a movie, I'd do that movie. I told you the story, Henry. I showed up for my first interview at Young and Rubicam in a white leisure suit. And I was tired.
I love it.
That's amazing.
Wear a suit, but that was the only suit I had.
Oh my God!
70s, in full bloom disco days. So, I had my big striped heels on my shoes.
My God!
Shoes. And to this day, when I think back on it, I'm sure that the security guard at Young and Rubicam thought I was delivering the drugs to the main floor.
I'd have been like, Frank, you coming to the club or you coming to work?
I had a satchel, an old gym bag, an old red and white gym bag, because I had made T-shirts when I was in college. And I loaded up the T-shirts because I was going to show them how artistic I was. Like I said, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I showed up with a gym bag with a white leisure suit coming in the front door of the world's largest advertising agency. Can you imagine? The guy says, hey, delivery's around the back. I said, hey, what the hell are you talking about?
I am the delivery.
I got an appointment here today. And the guy got on the phone behind him. He got on the phone. He's like, who are you going to see? And I said, Jay McNamara. And he goes, I got a guy here, Jay McNamara. Oh, and I could see the surprise on his face. He goes, oh, go ahead upstairs. So anyway, I got my humble start in the advertising business. I was able to convince them to hire me without an MBA. And I told them I would start down shining shoes if I had to, and I would work my way up. And fortunately, they took a gamble with me. And I got a great education in marketing. I got a great education in branding and positioning. There was no such thing as a branding. We didn't call it back then. But in terms of the selling proposition and so on, I learned a lot and actually taught a course in that before I left. And I rose up the ranks there. And again, in the right place in the right time. One of my bosses, who was one of my best friends at Young and Rubicam, I was next door neighbors with a guy who was working at the NFL. And the guy asked him, a young marketing guy who's interested in sports, who can come on board at the NFL and help me out. And the rest was history. I took a little detour on the way and learned a lot about the stock market. And I took the company public in the interim because in 1982, the NFL went on strike. So I didn't go to work there right away. But in 1985, I wound up finding my way to National Football League and what was then called NFL Properties. And I wound up running a lot of the business operations for them on the licensing side for the NFL. And through that, I met a lot of the players in the NFL through a bunch of coincidences. And those players wound up asking me to come out and represent them in 1993. And I formed the company Integrated Sports International with my partners to this day, Steve Rosner and another fellow who's our third partner, Fred Freed. And we formed our own marketing agency for athletes, and the rest is kind of history. We sold that in 1999, and we formed our smaller place now, 16W Marketing, right here in Rutherford, New Jersey. And Steve and I have been together now going into our 26th year.
Wow, Fernando.
Wow.
When I tell you,
my brain is just blown, and so many things that you really said, resonated deeply. Well, a few, and then there's one specifically that I really want you to, highlight a little more, because I think it's important, especially for the younger demographic. You said something so powerful, but the two things that you mentioned prior to that were support and information. Support is so key, and I've been able to have support from the people on this call, and let alone everyone on the Emerging Leaders, and information is just a plethora when you're surrounded by titans. I always say, standing on the shoulders of titans. But what really resonated with me, Frank, is when you said, I'd be willing to shine shoes. Mm-hmm. And that to me is like, we just met, and I already know we're cut from the similar breed. I already know who you are, what you do, and what you're about, simply because you're willing to shine shoes. And I think that says something. And I believe that a lot of the younger generation miss that, and Jim says it all the time. And it's about what you give, It's about what you give. And you're going to get it back. And if you're willing to shine shoes, there's no reason why you moved up, and there's no reason why you're a super successful entrepreneur. It's not by chance. It's by design. It's by character. So besides shining shoes, I'm sure you did way more than shining shoes. How was it, how was it when you first started, and how did that attitude drive you forward? Because someone like Jim, to give someone like Fernando attention, I had to be willing to shine shoes. And I hunted that man down to let him know I'm willing to shine shoes. How did that propel you forward? How did that make you stand out amongst the rest? And how can we teach that for all those young entrepreneurs that kind of want that quick money, or just out of nowhere money, success happen in a day? How can we teach them to shine shoes?
Well, the truth of the matter is I did shine shoes growing up. My brother actually made, to this day, I still have it. My brother actually made in wood shop, made an old shoe shine box that he used, handed it to my next brother, who handed it to me. And, you grew up that way. But the point of all that is there's no, every job's important, and you should do every job you can to the best of your ability. You're going to shine shoes, be the best shoe shiner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we learned that from our parents. I'm sure we learned that from our parents, but I try to pass that on. But it also goes to never forgetting the little guy and treating people with respect. And those are just, those are things that need to be taught. And I think younger generation absolutely. I'm sorry, there's a phone ringing in the background.
That's all good.
We have to pass on those values and those attributes. I tell a story about a guy named Ed Ney, who was the chairman of Young and Rubicam. Now, he's one of the titans, as you mentioned the word titans before. He's one of the titans in all of advertising history. And Ed Ney, on the first day, when you were on your first day on the job at Young and Rubicam, now this is the biggest advertising agency, single advertising agency in the country. On the first day, he would go around and make sure he paid a visit to the people that were starting out on their first day. And Ed Ney mentored me and took me under his wing. He came around the first day I was on the job. It's another funny story. I was drunk as hell because my client took me out to lunch at the Palm, and we had about 7 martinis. And
I've been there.
I was laying on my desk, and some guy woke me up, and I was drooling on myself, and it happened to be Ed Ney. But I didn't know it was a tradition that he came around to welcome everybody, the first day. But he really took me under his wing. He told me I had great patent leather shoes. He actually bought me 2 pairs of shoes. credit card and told me to change the way I dressed. And, and
I wonder why.
So I don't know if people even know what patent leather is out there, but anyway, it's treating even the little guy with success. And I think if you're really a good leader, to bring it back on point, I think you surround yourself with great people. You treat them properly. You treat everyone with respect. You give them their space. You let them have their point of view. I learned a lot of lessons in the advertising business and then at the NFL. Paul Tagliabue was another mentor of mine. It still is to this day. Knowing and caring about the people that are working for you is really, really important. And I was in a big meeting up at General Foods, and I'm a little assistant account executive, carrying bags for people and so on. And I'm up there in a big important meeting one day, and they basically tell you to speak when spoken to, keep your mouth shut. And all of a sudden, the top guy in the room turns to me after listening to everybody give their points of view about a creative campaign or whatever. And he says, I want to hear what this guy has to say. Now, it was a moment of truth for me because, if your bosses tell you to keep your mouth shut, you go, oh shit, should I talk right now or not? But anyway, I was full of bravado, and so I gave the guy my point of view, and he turned around and he said, you know what, everybody, I agree with Frank. And, that didn't sit so well at Young and Rubicam, but I learned a lesson that, when you're a good leader, it doesn't matter who's giving you the ideas or who's giving you the feedback or whatever it might be, opinions count. And, I had overcome that within my own shop. But luckily, I had bosses who, valued that and trusted that, they had good people working with them, which was a good thing. But so I learned a lot from that. So, I do that to this day. To this day, I'll turn, and before I get off a phone call or a conference call, I'll say, okay, what do you think? Okay, what do you think? Okay, what do you think? So that everybody feels as if they have a contribution to be made, and towards our ultimate goal or our ultimate purpose.
I love it. And Frank, I didn't get a chance to talk to you since the summertime, but I want to share with you a quick little, I want to thank you for something. So Frank and I met in his office in the middle of summer last year when I first met him. And the one thing that you asked me was, what do you want to do with this business? And that question got me very clear and focused. Okay. And I remember saying to you, I want to work with less people, but make more money. And you said, well, then you need to position yourself that way. And now I didn't get a chance to tell you, but from that day, I went on. And shortly after that, I closed 2 $100,000 clients. And I wanted to thank you for that because I needed you, believe it or not, to give me that validation, whatever that is. And I think a lot of people work that way. They just need somebody to give them permission to say, yes, you can charge that because what you are worth it. And I think that is a true mentor and a true leader. Now, I want to shift gears for a second because it's tough to cram in 35 years of expertise in 30 minutes of time, right? Now, you had mentioned that you have a partnership of what, over 25 years with Steve Rosner, right? Yep. And now that is very far and few that people hold partnerships at that level, right, for so long. Mm-hmm. My question to you, Frank, is how do you create a partnership and that is that successful? What are the elements that go into a great partnership?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think it's just like a marriage. It's first of all, it's unconditional trust. That has to be the start. So Steve and I have we've never worried about what we expense. We've had our outside accountants and the auditors and everybody else come in and say, hey, Steve spent this year and you spent that. When we look at them and say, listen, we don't give a crap about that. That's not important. So first, it's unconditional trust. And second of all, it's really a blending of, responsibilities and talents, and knowing what our strengths are and being confident in who we are and what we are. So we don't step on each other's toes. Now, that's hard to do, but in our case, it's absolutely Steve. I was just telling a story about preparing for Super Bowl. He will know, I'm telling you right now, he knows what hors d'oeuvres we're serving at our party on Thursday night, which is a major, major invitational party for all the who's who of the business in sports. I couldn't even tell you where it's at. Okay. So, I go, people say, where are you staying? I say, I don't know. He tells me when I get there. Okay. He'll tell me, I don't even get my tickets till we're walking in the game. I'm like a little kid. Steve hands me my tickets. So, I fly at 30,000 feet and I worry about what's happening next with our business. And I worry about, running the place. And I worry about our corporate side. Steve handles the talent, and he can tell you, we'll have close to 80 appearances that we are responsible for of our athletes or talent that we've brokered down at Super Bowl. We'll probably have maybe more than 80 counting. And he can tell you everyone. And so that's not me. And he's in touch with these guys on a daily basis, and he holds their hand on a daily basis. I'm worried about how we're going to build content for them and launch a channel and what's their next, what's happening out there in the world as we're doing podcasts and so on, and say, hey, let's try to get our guys to do X, Y, or Z, or I got some corporations that are interested in this and they want to use our guys and so on. So it's the blending of those talents, but it really comes from confidence. From being confident in what you're able to do and knowing what you're not good at, and then just trusting each other and having faith that you can absolutely. It doesn't matter if you're home, if you're not in the office 24 hours a day, if you're not seeing each other. I'll be in Hawaii for the month of February. He'll be in Florida, and we won't miss a beat. We will not skip a beat. We'll be in touch with each other like this, for the entire month, and our office will run like a clock because we trust each other. I'm not worried about what time he goes to run or go work out or whatever, because we both know at midnight we're still working, Right. So that's just the way it is.
So it's cohesiveness, it's trust. I mean, it's the abilities to be very self-aware. I think your self-awareness, both of you, I think, has been a huge contributor to the success of the business. I see a lot of people that partner up with people that are perhaps too similar in personality, perhaps, or something along those lines, and then you start to see the bulls start to smash horns and
yeah, Again, I think that can work. I think, there are agencies where there are top agents, and it's just a matter of who's responsible for whom and so on, and they make that work. I've seen some successful partnerships that way. In our case, it just happens to be that, we like to do different things, and we have different strengths, and we play to those strengths. Steve could do my job, and I can do his. If we really wanted to, but that's not what we want to do. That's not playing to necessarily our strengths, So it makes us better. It makes 1 + 1 = 3 in our case, because we're in our niche and we're doing what we love, which is something else for everybody out there. For the young people trying to get into the business and developing leaders. If you're doing something that you're passionate about, you guys know this. If you're doing something that you're passionate about and you really enjoy, it's never a job. There's a saying that goes that way. You never worked a day in your life if you're doing what you really love, and that's the way we think about it. Now, the flip side of that is a lot of people want to get into the sports business because they think it's all glamour and they think it's so much fun going to the Super Bowl. I'm going to be exhausted. When I get back from Super Bowl, I'm lucky I'm not sick, because I'm going to be going from 7 in the morning to 1 o'clock in the morning, and I am wall to wall. I already know it. I'm looking at my calendar going, oh my God. And for people to think, oh, you're going to Super Bowl, you're going to have so much fun. I'm telling them, listen, this is work. This is what I do. This is how we make money. This is how I pay for whatever it is that, my family and everything else needs. Yeah. So it's not all fun and games. Now, look, there are a lot of people that would, give a lot to be in my shoes and, to have dinner this night with those athletes and have meetings with these people and be in the midst of all the things that we're going to be doing at Super Bowl and go to NFL honors. Chris Long's potentially, he's a candidate for a nominee for the Walter Payton Man of the Year this year. So, we'll be at those kinds of events. But again, this is what we do for a living. So people have to remember that. It's not all fun and games. I tell a story that if you're in the sports business, you got to think about it. It's not a 9-to-5 job. Sports happens at night. All week long. So you're doing your job all day long. Then you got your games and everything at night. Then weekends. Sports happens on weekends all the time, right? Saturdays and Sundays, and and on holidays. Sports happen on holidays. You're working Thanksgiving, whatever it might be, right? Our guys are out broadcasting on Thanksgiving. They're not with their families and so on. So it doesn't close down when everybody else is relaxing and watching on TV. People are working. Yeah. And so if you want to be in the sports business, you got to realize that you are not going to go punch a clock. You're not going to go, check in at 9. You're not going to now, ride skateboards down the hallway and, and all that crap. So,
well, you bring up a good point, Frank. So, when you're hiring the younger generation, right? What are you looking for in personality type? What are you looking for in business acumen? What are some of the attributes that you're looking for?
That's a great question. And I can tell you that I can tell pretty quickly. First of all, one of the things that I talk about that makes a great leader is preparation. Preparation. I don't go into a meeting if I don't know who I'm meeting with. I don't know everything about them. I will not have a meeting because I'll be panicked. If I walk into something and I don't know what the subject matter is, who it is I'm talking to, where they went to school, what their kids are doing, whatever, then I feel unprepared. And too often, young people come into my office looking for career advice or whatever, and they haven't even read my bio and they haven't been on my website or whatever. And I'll plant a little question or whatever to test them, and they'll fail miserably. And then I'll say, you know what, you're not cut out for this business, or you're gonna have to go back and work hard on X, Y, or Z. The other thing is, communication skills. And just last week. A young man was referred to me by a client, and I said, ask him to send me an email so I can, distribute it internally or whatever. And it was one of the best letters put for an applicant for a job that I've read in 20 years. And I passed it around to everybody in my company. And I said, I want you to copy this. I want to keep it in our files. And when somebody comes in, looking for, for career advice or potentially looking for a job, I want you to show them this. And I say, and here are the reasons why this is so. Not only was it incredibly well written grammatically, spelling, everything else, but it told me about the kid. It told me about why they wanted to be in sports. And it wasn't just because I like sports. I play fantasy games all the time or whatever. There were all the reasons why and what he had done in his life, and what led him to this kind of making a decision to pursue this kind of career. I thought it was fantastic, and I don't get letters like that anymore. We're lucky if nobody writes a letter. Nobody, even if it's an email form, everything's shorthanded and misspelled, and there's a lack of preparation. So that's really essential to me. If somebody comes into this business prepared, having done their research, having done their work, then they've got a much better shot. The others, I don't have any time for.
Got it. So what you're saying is if I show up with patent leather shoes, a white suit, and half drunk, that's not the right way to get your attention.
Well, I never said I was half drunk. That I would never do. Now, you know what? I wouldn't actually now I did that. So I wouldn't really hold that against you. But, I might have to ask you why you're dressed like that. Now, look, you're probably pretty flamboyant. And by the way, Henry can be pretty flamboyant, and I pride myself on being flamboyant. So a little bit for an older.
I'm with it.
So when Henry walks in with his purple suits and stuff, some people might raise an eyebrow, but you gotta look underneath. He overcomes that with his personality, so it's okay.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Frank. Full transparency, guys. The folks that are listening and tuning in, we do these podcasts on Zoom, and we have a little chat that goes on the side of the recording, and we do these videos. We actually are recording a video right now, and we have a chat. And I just wanted to make sure we have some great questions in the chat that we're trying to get out here to Frank as soon as possible. And as we're coming short of time, I just wanted to have Fernando. Can you see the chat, or is it?
Yeah, I could see the chat.
You can. Okay.
So I wanted to combine like a 2-pronged question because I know we're right into that 30-minute mark.
Yeah, go for it.
One of the things we like to go through here is like war stories. And I have to put in a little personal here because I know I'm eager and I think everyone else is eager. You mentioned Super Bowl. You mentioned 80 appearances that you have to manage. So I'm going to combine a 2-pronged question on, who are some of your clients and what are some of the hardest challenges you've had to overcome in really working with those clients or finding those clients or maybe potentially firing those clients? Because as Henry mentioned, sometimes working with more people is not the goal. It's working with the right people. So what would you say are some of the hardest obstacles you've had to overcome with working with some of your, coolest clients? And if you can let us know some that you've worked with, that'd be great as well.
Well, I've been incredibly fortunate. I've worked with, a real who's who of top athletes, and not only in football, but in all sports. And our clients today have been with us a very long time. Boomer Esiason and Howie Long. We're close. Boomer says he was our first, so we go with that. And Howie and Boomer have been with us all 26 years. Phil Simms has been with us over 20 years. Chris Collinsworth, pretty close to that. Ron Darling, and those are a few. Bob Pop in the local area, people would know the voice of the Giants.
Akeem the Dream, right? Akeem.
Well, over the years, we represented Akeem Olajuwon, a number of basketball players, and Clyde Drexler, Clyde the Slide back then, represent Olympians, Dan Jansen and Janet Evans, represented baseball players, basketball players, so on, across the board. I was telling my trainer this morning was talking to her daughter, and her daughter forgot to bring her sports bras back to school today. And I said, we kind of launched the sports bra business. And she said, what do you mean? I said, we represented Brandy Chastain, who was on the women's U.S. soccer team, and tore her jersey off when she scored the winning goal. And all of a sudden the Nike sports bras, was off the charts. So. It's amazing the things we've been a part of. Obstacles, one of the hardest things we ever had to do, and my partner would speak to this a little more, with his heart, because one of the guys that really put him on the map was Lawrence Taylor, one of his first clients. He represented Lawrence for over 10 years. Loves Lawrence, as do I. And, Lawrence is a guy with a big heart, but obviously, had a lot of issues over the course of his career and battled some demons and so on. And, we were recruiting in the 1990s. We had the number 1 draft pick in the NFL draft 7 years in a row. And we were out there recruiting. We were partners with an agent named Lee Steinberg, who was probably the number 1 football agent in the business, and is now back, represents Mahomes and a bunch of others now. Remarkable comeback. Another whole story that some young people can look up. But we were recruiting a running back, and we were out in California, and I was showing people our client list. I was showing his mom our client list, and I said, these are the people we represent. And she says, well, what's common about them? I said, well, we try to represent the good guys. We ask our people to give back. We like to make sure none of our guys are getting in trouble, and this and that. And she went down the list and pointed to this one guy, Lawrence Taylor. And she said, oh, really? What about him? And so I came back and I said to Steve, when we make our pitch, we love Lawrence, but it's starting to get to be, an issue. And, he had been with Lawrence a long time, and we weren't going to leave Lawrence. And Lawrence came to us, and he was going to do this crazy wrestling match in Japan against Andre the Giant or something. And we ultimately said, Lawrence, we're really strongly advocating that you don't do that. And he said, I'm going to do it. I need the money. And that was it. And we said, you know what? If you do this, unfortunately, we're going to have to not represent you. And that was gut-wrenching for my partner, Steve. That was one of the toughest decisions he had to make in his life. But, that was where we were at the business. So you talk about the obstacles you face and the tough decisions you face. That was one of the biggest. But luckily, knock on wood, we haven't had too many of those. You have your daily struggles and you have your daily pressures. And, thank goodness for the vast part of our career, our athletes have stayed out of any kind of major controversies or trouble. But when that happens, you got to be there for them. You got to have their backs, and you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. And luckily, when we were at the zenith and we were representing hundreds of athletes in the 90s, there were no cell phones and there was no Twitter and social media and so on. If there were, our lives would have been a lot different. Probably not have had as much fun, frankly, but our lives would have been a lot different.
Well, one thing I want to add to that is, any sort of setback. I had some setbacks last year that kind of stunk, and it's like, what do? You feel like it's the end of the world. You feel imposter syndrome starts to creep in, or you start to doubt yourself and all of that stuff. And I'll never forget, one of my mentors said to me, Henry, the reason why your windshield is bigger than your rearview mirror in your car, right? I says, no, tell me. He says, because you're not effing going that way. And that was it. That was it. And ever since then, and he said, and to top it off, these setbacks are temporary. They're like storms. They come in. You may feel like you're in the heat of in the middle of the storm, and you feel like it's going to wipe out the whole town. But eventually, that storm shall too pass. It will pass, and the sun will come out again. And all I kept thinking was, this is temporary. This isn't going to be forever. And lo and behold, 2-3 weeks after that, everything turned around. And the business just exploded. And, we did more business last year and with 8 clients than we did with 48 clients the year before.
Yeah, but what's the key to that? Okay. If you build
mindset.
If you build a real solid foundation, okay, and all the things that we've talked about today, okay, your reputation precedes you. You treat people well. You have confidence in what you do. Listen, we've all been knocked down in our lives. I got knocked down 100 times. I had knee surgeries. I had, tons of obstacles to overcome. White leisure suit. Italian Roman Catholic at Princeton University. You run into adversity, and it's always, not that you get knocked down. It's how you get yourself back up, and all those things that we talked about of a great leader. You go back into the marketplace, you prepare, you look, you shine shoes, you do whatever you got to do to be able to, put yourself back up, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And you do that when you're like you and like the people that we think are great leaders. They plow through things and they emerge and they come out that other side of that tunnel and move forward.
Yeah, I saw a quote recently. It said amateurs will sulk about, or they'll sulk on their defeat, but a true professional will dominate the next game. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a powerful quote. I'll never forget that.
What's Tom Brady been saying all season? What's his new mantra? Hey, bet against us. Bet against us. Everybody's down on us. I don't know who the everybody is, but they've been able to, Belichick and he have been able to develop this mantra that they're the underdog. How that could be is amazing, but they've created this scenario, and he just said it in an interview yesterday that I saw that he had some moments this year where he doubted himself. himself, and he did some things. I don't know what they were because I thought he was brilliant, but he said he did some things which he regrets, and so he said he's gonna change that next year, and he's gonna play till he's 45. So, like I said, great leaders, can overcome the obstacles and find ways to motivate themselves.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, Frank, I got to thank you as part of the Chamber team and the Emerging Leaders Podcast co-host. I thank you so much for, again, spending 50 minutes with us now and sharing your expertise and sharing those war stories and your backstory, because I feel like everybody has a backstory. I feel like, without one, you really don't exist. And you've been so present in the organization, and you've been so generous with sharing that backstory. You're inspiring a lot of people. So I just want to thank you for coming on.
Thanks. Well, you got to pay it forward, Fernando. You guys, you'll be sitting in my shoes and looking back on a career. I go back with my little brother, Jimmy Kirkus, till we were 5 years old, and it's we were taught that, right? Pay it forward. Try to make the next generation better than yours. And I hope America never loses that. I hope we don't lose that American dream.
Not at all. We appreciate you, Frank. Thank you for being here with us. All the leaders that are listening, thank you. And we can't wait, to continue to build this relationship. And just please, hang out with us in the chamber. I saw you speak once at one of the luncheons, and I loved it. And if I had one ask, I would just ask that, you continue to support, you continue to be there, because it's people like you and Jim and all these leaders that we have, and Henry, that keep us, the emerging leaders and the younger crowd really coming through. So we thank you. And if you happen to have the time, we're going to be doing a Millennial Meadowlands Mastermind right on top of the Bergen Business Expo. And I'm sure everyone listening would like to shake your hand and check out your patent leather shoes. I just can't get over it. So if you can please wear those in a white suit. I don't have the authority to do this, but I'm going to talk to Jim, and we're not going to let you in unless you show up in a white pinstripe. I'm going to add pinstripe suit to some patent leather shoes. And I'm sure everyone listening would love to meet you and see you and shake your hand. So as Henry alluded to, we thank you. We're honored by you. And thank you for sharing some wisdom. And I hope we can continue to build this relationship.
That's great. My pleasure. Anytime.
All right. So with all that said, guys, real quick, May 8th at the Venetian is where the Business Expo will be taking place, as well as the Millennial Mastermind, the Meadowlands Millennial Mastermind, which will be the tail end of that event. So for more information on the event, go check out, Meadowlandschamber.org. I want to make sure we get the URL correct.
Meadowlands.org.
Meadowlands.org, even easier. So go check out Meadowlands.org for more information on that. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button yet on this podcast, hit that purple button right now. And one last thing is you have to, because this is the fuel that will the fire that fuels this flame. It's writing a written review about the podcast. We will read every single review. If there's questions, comments, concerns, future topics of episodes you want us to address, drop it in the review section and we will address it, because you are part of this. Without this audience, this podcast does not exist. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you again, guys, for tuning in. Stay tuned for our next episode. Talk to you soon, guys. Take care.
Go on.
You've been listening to the Meadowlands Chamber of Commerce Emerging Leaders Podcast, sponsored by Henry Kaminsky Jr. and www.uniquedesigns.net. Don't forget to subscribe and stay connected with us by visiting www.meadowlands.org.